Hello everyone. Today I am going to be reviewing the fourth studio album by Ariana Grande titled Sweetener. It was just released this past Friday, the 17th of August, 2018. I'm putting myself upside down here, as upside down is a little bit how I feel after listening to this record. Definitely a bit topsy-turvy going into this. So I am going to start this review off by just clarifying that I am not a huge Ariana Grande fan. I'll admit she has some very nice vocals. They're, pretty above the average. I would say that her voice may be a little bit overrated. I know some people may come for me for that. She has great vocal range, but I've always had some problems with her enunciation. And the way she delivers her lyrics, it sometimes is a little bit lazy sounding. And I know she has a very soft voice, but I think that that sometimes masks some kind of deeper strength in her voice and some really nice vibrato, which does feel missing sometimes. She can definitely hit some really amazing notes and she can harmonize really well. So overall, she has a very strong voice. But there are a lot of other things that make an artist, I think, a success. And unfortunately, on this record, we're really seeing, I think, all the other factors fall out of sync with her talent. And we're starting to kind of, in my opinion, remember this is of course just my opinion, discover that maybe there isn't actually quite as much to phone home about in terms of an Ariana Grande record. But again, this is my perspective. I'm probably never going to review her previous albums on this channel just because I'm not really interested enough in talking about them. They have some great songs. There's some really catchy pop songs on a lot of her records that, I'll admit were definitely things I repetitively listened to at the time. But I always viewed her music as a little bit just vanilla, kind of mainstream pop. I always thought she was a little bit overrated. And I feel like I can say that to my audience because I do tend to review artists who are a little bit less mainstream, but Ariana has a huge fan base, and I feel a little bit like they kind of just worship whatever she puts out. Dangerous Woman, her previous, was an album I was not madly in love with. Because I just got the vibe from the snippets that a lot of the songs weren't going to do it for me. There was a lot of hip-hop influence on Dangerous Woman. And that was just something I was not really finding suiting. Like, I don't think her rapping is a direction she should ever be going, in this sort of monotone vocal delivery. I found that there was a lot on Dangerous Woman that was like that, and I just felt like it was very campy and very generic is a good word. There were songs like Moonlight that really kind of stuck out, moments where her vocals really soared. So Sweetener as an album is a tricky thing to talk about because I could go like super quickly through a lot of these songs and just basically give you the same sort of, felt like I'd heard enough. Like, there were plenty of songs on this record that are definitely songs I'm not going to be coming back to. But what makes Sweetener unique is that, first of all, this is the first time I've ever been really hyper following an Ariana era. She has been hyping this album up so much over the last 4 months, even beyond that. Now, keep in mind, it's been a little over 2 years now since her previous record, and we had in 2017 the absolute tragedy that occurred in Manchester. Now, I always kind of assumed that this was going to possibly be a real catalyst for Ariana to really take her potential and create something truly iconic and classic. The comparisons that her fans draw to Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston, I was really hoping that her next album was going to be the album that really proved her worth in this industry and really proved her talent, and an album that would stand the test of time as a true classic of R&B, soulful pop, dance pop, all of those genres that she sort of flitters around. So when we had the release of No Tears Left to Cry back in April, I'm going to link my review to that song because I was blown away by that track. This is a Max Martin produced track that is very Europop, very Eurodance, and was completely floored by predominantly the chorus and the production on this song, as well as her vocal harmonizations. This song was just everything I was asking for an Ariana return. It was epic. It was this big, bombastic pop tune. It was danceable. It was catchy. It had the iconic choreography. The music video was like insanely high budget and insanely well executed. I didn't find it over the top or cheesy in that it was a lot of green screen and CGI. She's done a lot of green screen kind of music videos before, a la like Break Free, which just come off very cheesy. And No Tears Left to Cry actually felt like it was portraying a message, even though that message was kind of hard to decipher because there was so much in the visuals, the upside down world, the faces and the masks that she was putting on and taking off in the visuals. I just felt like something huge was coming. Like this was the signifier of an epic album. So it got my hopes up insanely high. And that is a bit unfortunate because I felt like it was basically being, strung along for the ride, waiting for something that would ultimately lead to disappointment. We had the song The Light Is Coming released in June, and that was kind of when things started to go downhill. Now I'm going to go through the track listing. Before I do that, let me just say that this album cover is atrocious. I do not know who okayed this album cover, but from an artistic direction, photographic direction, this album cover is doing nothing. I guess the one saving grace it has is that it's flipped upside down, but the whole flipping upside down aesthetic for this album makes absolutely no sense. That aesthetic is not explored whatsoever on this record, besides being mentioned in the song Sweetener, the title track, as Flip It, Flip It. There is just so much that is underutilized in terms of album aesthetic and concept that in her delivery and in her presentation of this record, and even in the title Sweetener, which is a very unique album title, which at first I wasn't madly in love with, but I grew to think could actually be a really interesting song title and album title. This whole album just feels like wasted potential. And this album cover is a perfect example of this build up for nothing, if that makes any sense. When this album cover was released, I was very disappointed. And you know me, I'm an artist. I really buy a lot of stock into album covers. They mean a lot to me. An album cover definitely can't ruin a great album, but it certainly will not. But if an album is something I'm on the fence about, an album cover helps me sort of get in love with the concept and the era. And album covers just have that power. And there's something about her expression on that album cover that just isn't working. And there's just so many better promotional photo shoots that she's done for this record that could have really sold this home more. Anyway, I get she wanted the simplisticness because there's a lot of minimalism to the production of this album. This album is predominantly produced by Pharrell Williams, something that we are going to come to discover is not necessarily the greatest thing. And also Max Martin and Ilya. Those are the two other big producers. We open up with Raindrops and Angel Cried. Now, this is exactly the kind of thing that is just an absolute tease because it is so gorgeous. It's an a cappella, just beautiful harmonizing opener that just sends chills down your spine. It's only 30 seconds long, and I don't mind. I love when artists do these beautiful fade out intros to albums because it adds this mystery, and it's a beautiful way to open an album. And I'll admit, Raindrops with Angel Cried is one of the best songs on this record, and it's just an album opener. You would think we're off to a really good start because the emotion and the way she delivers this, I mean, I think of this song as a tribute to Manchester in the strongest sense of the word. Even though it's more personal, it's obviously referencing more of Ariana's, losing someone close, whether it's a relationship or a person who's passed away. This song speaks to the tragedy that we all felt, coming from Manchester and the loss of life and just the utter heartbreak, the idea of an angel cried that day. And I remember just hearing about it and just feeling a certain way that I'd never really felt in terms of tragedies in the news. These people are just going to a concert. Maybe it was just more relatable to me. We hear about terrorist attacks, but this was just, these teenagers were just here to listen to their favorite artist. And it turned into, for many of them, the worst night of their lives. And for quite a few of them, they never even returned from it. And that's just a truly tragic thing. So that song is carrying a lot of the emotional weight on this record, because then we go right into the first track, Blazed, featuring Pharrell. Also, I don't really get the whole, I have to put everything in no capitalizations. There are just a lot of, strange aesthetic choices on this record that I just feel like the record isn't good enough to justify. It just feels arbitrary. Why are none of the titles capitalized? I don't know. She just felt like it. I feel like it was sort of in the last minute stages of the record, it was sort of well, we have an album that's not actually as good as we always said it was going to be, and so let's just try and make it as unique as possible. Anyway, Blazed featuring Pharrell is actually one of the Pharrell songs that I'm actually not in absolute disgust over. It's catchy, and that's all I'm going to say. It's a traditional Pharrell song. He vocalizes, he ad-libs. Ariana's vocals are kind of traditional, what we would expect. I do think they're underutilized in this song. Ultimately, what we're going to find with Pharrell and Ariana's pairing is that Ariana is just not very well suited to Pharrell's production. And I've seen a lot of people talk about, we can't always just blame Pharrell. I mean, Ariana chose to work with him. Ariana chose to include all these songs on this record. So, Ariana bears a bit of that. Is Ariana really the one who's not really that talented? Or because Pharrell can do some amazing stuff. I love Pharrell's music. Not all of it, and I'm not the biggest Pharrell Williams fan. But he's done some amazing stuff for artists I love. I love what he did with Madonna. It was just purely iconic and artistic. And I just feel like it's like clocking in and just sort of, running through the motions of a pop song without really giving your all or without really impressing anyone. The Light Is Coming ends up being the biggest disappointment on this record because of that. This was a song that was hyped so much back in June as the second promotional single from this record, not really the second official single. And with a title like The Light Is Coming, it's such a cop-out. You just think like, oh my gosh, there's gotta be, again, we're post-Manchester. We're in an era politically that is so divided in this country. We really feel like we're in the darkness. And unfortunately, that's a common thing that I feel like, I've been struggling a lot with my own mental health just because of my life and everything. But ultimately, I think the entire United States and even the world to some extent in the last few years has been going through a depression. And the idea of making a pop song called The Light Is Coming, I got chills down my spine. I was like, this is amazing. Ariana is probably going to make something so iconic, so beautiful, so soulful, so rich, so timeless. And we get this botched attempt to recreate a very urban sounding Pharrell song, which I talk about in my God is a Woman review when I mentioned this song. It's basically Lemon, the song that N.E.R.D. released back in 2017, but dumbed down and stripped away of anything that's actually fresh or catchy. This song is just not it. It's just flatlining. It's repetitive. It's drawn out. The sample that's used in the background is agonizing. At first, you're like, okay, maybe I can try and get used to this. When you're trying to include such a political sample that might bear a lot of weight, you've got to explore that more. You can't just throw it into the mix and then let the rest of the song just be about sensual lyrics and friendship and chemistry and like kind of teenage kind of lyricism. I don't understand like where the idea of the light is coming. I mean, what is this all tying into? Are you making any sort of political statement on this record? No. And I don't actually feel any sort of hope or any sort of instilled emotional tethering to the way this song is. And it's just bare. And it's a real unfortunate tragedy, to say the least, on an album that has just so much potential. Sighing is probably the best way you can react to it. So we move into REM, another song title I was excited for. This is apparently a Beyonce reject track, and you can definitely understand why. This definitely has that R&B, early 2000s kind of vibe to it, late 90s. I'll admit that although it's not my style of music or a genre that I'm that fascinated with, I can at least, if people say they love the song, I'm not going to be like, how can you like this? I can understand why people like it. Personally, this song does nothing for me. It is another Pharrell Williams track, and that has a lot to do with it. I just think it's very monotone. Especially coming after two songs that are already very minimalist, very boring, and very lazy in my opinion, REM is just not helping pick things up. And, maybe if it was placed in another spot of the album, it would make it a little bit more welcoming. Because it definitely comes across as a late night, sultry sort of one-on-one moment with a lover. Like a song REM you would think. It actually fits, to some extent, the actual concept, which is a first for this record, as the album so far is just full of mismatches. But for me, REM is not a highlight. But I appreciate Ariana's vocals. I appreciate the R&B flair and soul, and there are songs that are almost similar to that style on other albums of hers that I just was never really that connected to. But I'm not going to, say it's absolutely terrible because, music is subjective. So God is a Woman, it's like, again, there are these amazing tracks nestled in this record. I can't just, unfairly sabotage the whole thing. Ariana was like, I have to put some really iconic songs, and she definitely put her best foot forward with the lead singles from this record. I mean, I reviewed God is Woman, I'll link it in the description. I had a lot of great things to say about this track. I love the gospel choral harmony towards the end. I wish we saw more of that utilized. I love the guitar instrumental. It's very almost Eastern sounding. It's very psychedelic. And it's a beautiful blend of her pop sensibilities that she's so known for, but taking it in a different direction and a little bit more of an experimental direction, which is fine. Experimental is good. And this album is very experimental. And tracks like this demonstrate that. But there are a lot of moments on this record where I don't even think she's being that experimental. I mean, yes, she's experimenting with a new genre for her, more R&B, but there's not actually any sort of pushing of the envelope of R&B music. It's like doing the safest, most boring bottom line attempt at creating that kind of music. And that's not experimenting. That's just cashing in on another kind of genre for the sake of it. Sweetener, the album title track, oh boy, I don't know. I mean, this is just, the production is all over the place. It feels like there's multiple songs trying to compete for your attention. The way the song changes up, there are some beautiful key changes that go on in the bits of the chorus that I think are like trying to be iconic, trying to stand on their own 2 feet. But then just something in the production or the way the song progresses just constantly brings it back to this sort of messy status. And these are songs I can't really say a lot of positive stuff. Besides that, there are some moments of, vocal talent, where again, we're not like saying Ariana's voice is terrible. It's the arrangement, it's a lot of the production that's holding this song back. And Successful, which follows, is another song like The Light Is Coming that I think is the worst song on this album. It just flatlines, it just discordantly kind of carries through this R&B beat that's not going anywhere, that's very repetitive, and I was just left thinking, why? This was an album that was just so hyped. It is so disappointing. So we finally go into the Max Martin and Ilya produced tracks in the latter half of this record. We come to Every Time, which is a song that definitely feels like it could have fit on Dangerous Woman or My Everything. It's very much more that sort of pop EDM sound, and it has a melancholic tinge to it. And I don't mind it. It's definitely not standing up above the rest, but it's a change up. And this is where the cohesion factor becomes an issue. Because also, if you're going to make an album, commit to kind of one sound or kind of one overarching genre that tends to help it at least feel like it's its own package. This album feels a little bit mismatched because of the different periods of music that she's drawing influence from in her own back catalog. But I think Breathing is where this album really starts to climb into a peak. Breathing has the potential to be a huge pop hit. The beat drop, the instrumentation, the production, it's a powerhouse. And I feel like this is the exact kind of territory that, may be a bit predictable for her. And I know people will be like, but she needs to change, she needs to evolve. No, I think she has her lane, and I'm not saying that she should stick to it, but I definitely think that in this case, sticking to what you know is what's paying off. Even with No Tears Left to Cry, which is the following track, which I love and is probably my favorite song on this record, you can see just how going back into that pop dance territory, even the EDM territory, which I'm not crazy about EDM, but Ariana, she makes it tolerable, and I definitely think Breathing, even besides just, this is one of the first times I'm going to talk about lyrics, because I feel like lyrics-wise, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Ariana is not an amazing songwriter. I've always felt like, obviously she doesn't write a lot of her own lyrics, but when she does, it just feels like it's missing something. I feel like her lyrics are often very generic and very teenage. And I feel like there's some maturity that could come from that. But when she is talking about more personal, vulnerable things, Breathing, she talks about it was inspired by, just a panic attack and all of these emotions and fears in your head, and just telling yourself, it's going to be okay. Just keep breathing through this. And I really hate that sentiment. I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with panic attacks. And I feel like I almost want to listen to some of these songs when I'm going through that, because it's helpful to know like a big celebrity also goes through these things, and it's also something that is more insular, and I think it makes it actually much more accessible. A lot of people, we all can relate to just feeling overwhelmed, even if it's not just a panic attack, you know, just keep breathing. And this song has that, you know, keep carrying it on, keep moving forward with a positive edge. No Tears Left to Cry, iconic song. It's kind of hilarious that I'm talking about a song that I, in my first initial review, talked about being one of the best songs in the past 5 years in mainstream pop music. Do I still feel that way? Well, I will say that there might be a little bit of novelty that has worn off from No Tears over the past few months. I still love the song, but, you know, it's tricky. With some of these songs that just initially grab you, they don't have a lot of staying power. And maybe this song has dipped just a little bit in terms of my hype about it, but I still think it's a phenomenal track and the best song on this album for sure. It definitely in the verses leaves a little bit to be desired. As I said, rapping is not a style of hers that I think she should be employing. I do think it could be improved, but the chorus just seals the deal. And the chorus makes the verses kind of innocuous. I don't mind them because they're so short, and the main focal point is always going to be that iconic harmonizing that she does in the background to this very beautiful Scandinavian Europop sound that is very Max Martin, very iconic. I love it. And very emotional. Borderline featuring Missy Elliott. This song is definitely borderlining on cringy, if not already passing that borderline. Missy Elliott has such an underutilized feature. She's barely in one bar. I mean, it's an underutilized waste of a feature because Missy is very talented. And the urban R&B flair that it has is just not really getting me any sort of energy. I feel like just like I could fall asleep listening to it. I don't know why, but it just is not propelling. It's not propulsive. I mean, coming from a Nicki Minaj album that was like, oh boy, like it was just so high octane. And now seeing, you know, Ariana try and get urban, it's just, no, it's just a hard pass for me. Better Off is a song, it's like the one song on this album that it's not an instant gratification kind of song, but it has the potential to be a grower. And it's a song that I definitely don't want to be too quick to jump to conclusions on. It's a song I feel like I need to come back to after listening to it a lot. Because at first I was not in love with it, but it has the potential. You know, there's some beautiful a cappella vocals going on. There are some beautiful harmonizations going on. The idea, the concept, lyrically, it's a well-constructed minimalist pop song and with R&B, and I give props to Ariana for it. You know, is it something I'm going to phone home about? No, but it's definitely a track that is possibly going to rise in the ranks as being one of the memorable tracks. Definitely, the latter half of this record is far stronger than the opening half. Goodnight N Go. Now, I'm really excited to talk about this song. This is one of my other favorite songs off of this album. This is a Good Imogen Heap cover, which a lot of Ariana fans may be familiar with Imogen because Ariana talks about her a lot, but they're probably not that familiar with her music. I have reviewed Imogen Heap on this channel, all 3 of her solo studio records. Please check those reviews out if you're curious, or more importantly, check out Imogen's music. To all of the, you know, sort of mainstream listening Ariana fans out there, Imogen is a true wonder to behold. She's a UK artist that makes very experimental alternative ambient pop music, and I highly recommend you check her out. She may be a little bit too non-mainstream for a lot of Ariana Grande fans. I love that Ariana is such a fan of her. It kind of blows my mind to some extent because, I don't know, Ariana seems like someone who would just more like kind of R&B, soulful kind of mainstream music. But Imogen is much more unique, and this is an amazing tribute. Albeit, it's definitely an EDM adaptation. It's almost a little bit trap, which is kind of hilarious to think about when you think about Goodnight N Go, which is not a type of song. I mean, it's a pop tune. It's one of the more pop radio-friendly songs off of Imogen's first album, Speak for Yourself. But it is definitely not a song you would imagine going in a trap EDM direction. But you know what? I'll give it to Ariana. I mean, she's a mainstream pop artist. What are we expecting here? She samples it at the beginning, and then she launches into her own interpretation of her own verse that is not Imogen's. And then we finally get to the chorus or the pre-hook where she finally dives into that beautiful flow that I think she matches Imogen's vocals beautifully on. That breathiness is actually, I think, quite alluring. Though, if anything, I will say Ariana's voice is very breathy. It's almost too breathy for me. Like, I understand you gotta hear people's breathing, especially when they're very close to the microphone, but it feels like, like, it feels like she's gasping for air sometimes in these very, like, isolated takes where she's trying to sing, because she just has a very breathy voice, and I'm not gonna fault her on that. Everyone has their own unique voice. But it's just something that, like, I couldn't help but notice was a little distracting. But Ariana definitely delivers on this track, and she launches into the EDM drop, and she harmonizes over it, and then she does this beautiful uh, vocal ad-lib section towards the end where she's taking the framework of Goodnight N Go and adding her own spin. She's morphing it into her own version, which I love. Imogen has stated on Twitter that she's getting tons of requests to listen to the album. I must admit, I don't necessarily want Imogen to hear the rest of this album because I don't want her to think lowly of Ariana. I just kind of have a feeling Imogen's not going to be crazy about it, but I know that Imogen will like Ariana's version of Goodnight N Go. I think she will enjoy it. Even though it's not her style of music, I think she'll appreciate how she took a song from a completely different genre and blended it, I think, very well into a different genre. It's a success, and I'm glad, because when I saw that she was covering that song, I was really excited, and then I was really, really worried. I was like, she is going to make this song so much worse. And I don't think she did. I still prefer the original, though. But that's just how I am about most covers. Okay, Pete Davidson. As many of you know, she is now currently engaged to SNL star Pete Davidson. And when she originally announced the album track list, the song, which is an interlude, was originally just going to be called Pete. And a lot of us were like, ooh, whenever an artist makes a song named after a current lover of their life, it's sort of like getting their name tattooed on their body. It's not necessarily something that is going to last in terms of a relationship, and that song is going to be immortalized because of the fact that you put it on this album. I don't have a problem with artists doing that. I think it just represents the current time that they are in their lives, and that's fine. But she should have kept the title as just Pete. I feel like adding Davidson is just, ooh, it's just adding insult to injury. It's just overkill. We all know who you're talking about. And I actually think it makes it cuter by just having it be the first name. You know, when you're romantically with someone in bed, you're not calling them by their last name. It's just bizarre. You don't see that with most artists. You know, when they write a tribute to someone, it's always like just their first or middle name. It's never their full name. That's just too much. It's too serious, too. And so when I saw that the track list had been updated to add his last name to that song, I was just like, Ariana, what are you doing? And this was just another aspect of this album just falling apart, because it was just like I could sense things were just not going in a good direction. So besides the fact that Davidson should not be on that song's title, it's a cute song. I mean, it's an interlude. Again, I'm not like going to spend a lot of time talking about an interlude. It's a between the sheets sort of sensual kind of sweet moment on the record that I expected it to be. I'm not blown away by it, but I'm also not surprised by it. You know, I had low expectations. Some people are not crazy about her being with Pete Davidson. I don't have anything to say about that. I don't judge people's private lives. I think he's a great guy. I love SNL. I think he's actually pretty funny. He has very dark humor. And let me just say this. I have a feeling, because of her connections now at SNL, probably she's going to host the opening show back in October and probably be the musical guest. It's been a little while since she's been on the show, and since she's now announced that engagement, I have a feeling the first episode of the next season and this fall is probably going to have her as the main host. Just have a feeling. Plus, she'll be promoting this album. All right, the last song, which is another Pharrell Williams song, but one of the few Pharrell Williams songs on this record that I don't hate, is Get Well Soon. This is more of what I was hoping for on this record. With a title like Get Well Soon, again, Manchester comes to mind. And obviously a song that I would think of as being more a beautiful pop ballad. And it's very R&B, and it is a ballad, but it's also a lot of things. It's a bit all over the place, and it is a longer song. So there are moments where I feel like it gets a bit repetitive or a little bit messy. But overall, I think this song is a beautiful, sweet, intimate moment with Ariana. And it showcases a little bit more of that classical vocal that I think she's well known for, and I think that this album needed a lot more of. You know, just some soaring, soothing harmonies that just take you away on a trip. I love the chime influence. It's very Mariah Carey, and I think that the tribute and the chord structure is very Mariah Carey. Ultimately, I think it's a highlight song, and it just sends it out on a better note for this record, for sure. And again, lyrically, this song is speaking again about anxiety, but also it could be about the current political climate, the post-Manchester era that she's been going through. You know, come back down, girl. You know, you've been in this dark space. What's wrong? You know, I want to help you. This sort of inner monologue that is going on, and being inside Ariana's head is basically what it feels like. And the pastel tones to this song are just gorgeous, very nuanced, and I like that subtlety. And I think it's the one moment where Pharrell's production is actually matched, because he is a more R&B producer, and this is a song that is trying to be more classical R&B, and I think that that suits her well. So it's the one time where I don't feel like they're mismatched. So Pharrell didn't ruin everything on this record. So Get Well Soon is definitely another highlight. Also important to notice, at the very end, there is about a 40-some second period of silence, which is a tribute to the victims of the Manchester attack, which I think is a beautiful Easter egg to put in there, as I do think that that moment of silence is an important thing to end this album on. Overall, I'm left feeling underwhelmed, for sure. This is an album I was actually really, really excited for. You know, the way she kept talking about it and hyping it for months, I was like, this could be the album of 2018 for pop music. I mean, if we have more songs like God is a Woman and No Tears Left to Cry, I mean, the sky's the limit for Ariana. But this album proves that, you know, an album can really let you down, unfortunately. And Ariana as an artist I don't know, I don't really think that her staying power is going to be quite what a lot of people think it's going to be, you know? I don't want her to be a one-hit wonder. I don't want her to fade away, but I don't know, maybe she just needs to take a long time away from music, or, because I don't like artists just, if they feel like their album's not doing so well, like to just rush into the next thing. But at the same time, this album's not it for her. I feel like it's a general consensus. I mean, critically, it's getting mixed reviews. There are some really positive things being said about it. And I guess, again, the positive songs, well, obviously I know what my favorite songs are. Not every single song on this album is bad, that's for sure. And there are some actually really amazing moments. Like I said, it has the lead single that I think is one of definitely the best pop songs of 2018. If not even in the last few years, which is quite a lofty thing, which elevates this album quite a lot. And trust me, I would not be reviewing this record if I thought it was absolute trash. Trust me, I don't review albums I absolutely hate. I don't waste my time. I don't want to be that kind of critic on YouTube. It's because I love Ariana, and it's because I want her to succeed, that I felt like I needed to talk about, you know, some of the negative aspects of this record and not just gloss over it. So I hope people don't think I'm being too harsh, but I feel like a lot of Ariana fans agree that this is a learning curve. This is an experimental record. I wish it hadn't been hyped so much. I wish it hadn't taken so long for it to come out, because I just feel like, I don't know, it just feels like a big letdown, and that's the worst thing. I mean, I feel like Dangerous Woman, there was not a lot of prelude. It was sort of just released within 2 months of its lead single, and it just sort of ended up being actually a sleeper hit. You know, the album was sort of a moderate success when it came out, and then grew to be this huge success. And I feel like this album is I don't know what its staying power is. I can see Breathing probably being a huge single off of this record, and doing well on radio, but otherwise I'm just not really sure. So let me know in the comments what you think. Definitely check out Imogen Heap. That's one of the great things about this record, is that she's giving Imogen that extra promotion, which I love. And I do love her adaptation of it, so that I'm happy about. And like I said, highlight songs, No Tears Left to Cry, God is a Woman. Raindrops and Angel Cried is amazing, but it's an interlude and it's so short, so it's unfortunate. Goodnight N Go, Get Well Soon. And then I guess I have to give Breathing some props, because it's a good pop song. And Ilya does a pretty good job with the production on it. But yeah, otherwise, there are definitely some least favorites. You can probably guess which ones. I definitely think Successful and The Light Is Coming are the worst songs on this record. Like, just take them out. They're really bad. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Remember, this is just my opinion. And I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. There is a lot of light that I think Ariana is still trying to bring. You know, the album title is Sweetener, trying to sweeten people's lives. So there are some beautiful, I think, sweetening aspects of this record, and let's focus on that. So I hope you had, again, like a blessed day. Peace, love, and light. Bye.